What's up, grinders? Welcome back to the channel. Today we have another hyperpolyglot investigation. If you take a look at my screen right here, this is the investigation in question, Evil Deer and Community Investigation of Patrick Lencastre. Now, I believe it's pronounced Lancaster, but it could be pronounced different ways based on all the different pronunciation I've found online. Now, this has been one of the biggest investigations we've done yet. I know I say that with every investigation, but they just keep getting bigger and bigger. This one's 152 pages long. It covers everything from his language claims to courses that he runs, to our investigation of his individual abilities in different languages, and then also basically his personality overall and how he has interacted with the community. Because when we set out to do this investigation, we did our investigation, we found we need more information, we reached out to him and we asked him if he would be willing to take part in interviews and then also just respond to questions in general, and he was more than happy to take part in whatever number of interviews we wanted, and then also provide any additional information we needed. So that bode pretty well overall. It at least showed that the guy was prepared to be scrutinized and not have a hissy fit online like some hyperpolyglots who I have investigated. So I will be referring to this document throughout the duration of this video. If you want to see this document, it is in the description below. You can click on it, you can go check it out. However, don't attempt to edit it. It will be locked down because once I complete an investigation, the documents are locked down. That's basically how it works. So let's step through this and give you guys a little bit of a coverage on this. So basically, Patrick is a Brazilian hyperpolyglot known for being an enthusiast of Slavic languages, having been learning many of them, and even owning a YouTube channel dedicated to those languages only. He is the founder of Master Academy, an online school which offers a bunch of courses, mentorship programs for different languages focusing on English and Spanish. He also works as a translator for the well-known Chinese language exchange app Hello Talk. Now, when we set out to do this investigation, one of our members of our community actually asked him if he would be open to being investigated by my team, and he was more than happy to do that, which again bodes quite well. Now, he has a number of websites overall, as you can see them all here, but this is his main YouTube channel, so we'll just take a quick look at this. So this is the YouTube channel in question. Doesn't have too many subs. If we click here, there's no additional information. If you look at the videos, it's basically just him talking about learning languages, and it's all in Portuguese, although when he shows off his language abilities, obviously that's in different languages. Now, obviously, to investigate him, we need to figure out what his ability is, or at least his claimed ability in each one of the languages. And the first place that we really took a look at was the International Association of Hyperpolyglots, with which he is a member. And on that webpage, as you can see right here, he tells us what his ability very specifically is in each one of these languages. So we put that information down here, and then we cross-check that to other sources, such as the LinkedIn, as you can see right here, because he has a LinkedIn page and he mentions his language abilities in different languages. And then he also talks about it within TikTok. So there was a lot of competing sources about what his claims were, and some of them didn't quite match up. So we figured, you know what, he was open to an investigation. Let's reach out and ask him what his abilities are. And he copied basically the Hyperpolyglot Association page and just sent that to us. So we know that is what we're going to be working off when doing this investigation. It is his claim on the International Association of Hyperpolyglots webpage. Okay, now, he also is learning other challenges, but he doesn't mark them as languages that he speaks, which makes sense because he's doing basically challenges, and he doesn't really actually speak these languages yet. He's just doing challenges. So we're not going to take those languages into account because that would just be completely unfair. And additionally, this is the big part. It is his Master Academy. He runs a website or a school basically online where you can do a number of different courses, and some of these courses can be quite expensive. So for example, this one right here, the Spartan training for $1,400 US, and it says learn English or Spanish in only 4 months. And when queried about this, so basically we reached out to his support. They told us that you can go from 0 to B2 in 4 months, and they provided proof of that. Well, we've provided proof of support telling us that. So this is the Portuguese discussion, this is the English discussion translated. The teacher establishes a roadmap and the student reaches the exact goal that they set. As that can vary. I cannot anticipate it for you, but what has already happened was that some students went from 0 to B2 cert in 4 months. B2 cert in 4 months. Now, if you've watched videos on my channel before, you know I call bullshit on that. I don't think you can get to that type of level unless there's some really, really special edge cases going on here. So naturally, I reached out and asked him for more information about that. And he says, hello, yes, I offer intense training, and I say this based on real results. For example, I prepared a student who had zero knowledge of Spanish, and after just 4 months, she passed the Del B2 exam. I can provide proof of her results certificate, etc. if needed. The intense training helps students reach ambitious goals, but before accepting anyone into the program, we always start with an initial meeting. If the goal is unrealistic, I decline. In this student's case, I accepted her because she already had experience learning languages and her native language is similar to Spanish. So once we achieve the result, I can confidently say it is possible. So it is exactly what I imagined. It's an edge case. This is not something you can expect if you just happen to be like your average language learner type of thing. You're not going to get to B2 within that time frame, and it looks like he would reject you if you come in with unrealistic goals. And he's provided some more information about, the students and their journeys and stuff like that here, if you want to read that. So overall, I would say that this is, if it is actually the way he states it is, and you have a one-on-one meeting first up and you try to determine goals, and then after that you actually pay, then I don't see any issues with that. But on the front, on the webpage overall, and just like what the support staff say, when they say, yeah, you can get to that level, there definitely needs to be some training done for the support staff here to tell them that this is a very unlikely goal. However, it is possible for specific candidates. Now, he does also have another one here, such as the Master Club, where you basically learn 5 languages with a simple membership, accelerated fluency, innovative method. However, when you reach out, the Masters Academy team says that they're currently paused or being reformulated. And again, here's the proof, as you can see right here if you want to read that. Now, he also has a profile on this website here where he offers group classes for English and Russian, and I believe that he currently does not use the website and that the products listed there are no longer valid, but we do know that he has in the past used it. Okay, so based on all that information, what I'm going to do now is I'm basically going to map the languages and the claims that he makes to the European Common Framework. This is a system for measuring someone's abilities within a language. It's a formal testing system. Most people don't do it unless, they don't do the test unless they need to, but it is a good way of showing you guys where someone realistically is in comparison to what they claim. Now, looking at this, if you start from left, A1 up to C2, A1 is your basic beginner. They know the most basics of the language, the pronunciation, some basic questions and answers, really, really beginner stuff. Now, when people talk about fluency, generally what they mean is B2+. B2 is like an upper intermediate level. At this point, you're able to talk about most everyday things, just you can't go too far in depth. Then when people talk about native level fluency, we're not talking accents here, but like the ability to construct sentences and stuff, this is generally a C1+. Depending on how educated a person is, someone who's not educated at all would be like a C1. Someone who is well educated would definitely be a C2. C2 is where you're able to basically formulate speeches on the spot. You can write them and then you can present them and you can answer questions in these speeches about, social issues and stuff like that. One thing to take note is that this is not a linear graph. The differences between some levels can be quite large compared to others. If you look at the A levels, they're all pretty close together. But then once you go through the B levels, the distance gets quite wide. So what we've done is we've taken Patrick's claims and we've applied it to the Common European Framework of Reference just to make it very obvious for you guys. Now, the red one here, Portuguese is his native language, so we're not going to investigate that language. But as you can see, he has quite a scattering going from Chinese, which is he's just started learning. He's a complete beginner, all the way up to English and Spanish, which he actually learned and claims to be a very high level of fluency. So we're going to find out how true this is. So the first language we're going to take a look at is naturally English. Now, if you have a look at this document right here, you'll see interview organized by Evil Deer. We actually organized an interview with Patrick in English so we could get a proper estimate of his abilities, and we tested him based on his claimed levels. Okay, so this is the interview in question. In this one, he does English, but also Spanish and French, which we'll get to in a moment. And he was interviewed for basically an hour and a half straight. So the guy's got some endurance, let's just say that. Now, we're clearly not going to watch this entire interview, so I'm just going to give you a snippet of it to give you guys a taste test. And it's the same thing I'm going to do with all of his languages. You're just going to get a snippet. If you want to watch the rest of these interviews, or just the videos that we reference in general, they will all be linked in the document below.
Did you make a conscious decision to learn American English or a specific variety?
No, actually, that was not a conscious decision. I just absorbed that. I don't even, as I said, I don't even remember. So probably this guy used to speak like that, and then I absorbed that. Because to be honest, that was just a silly thing. But I remember that it was maybe 2016. I was watching Lucifer, the Netflix show, and they have Tom Ellis, the guy from Wales. And I was listening to it, I was like, come on, that's the most beautiful accent I've ever heard in my life. And then I was like, oh, I would love to absorb that, to copycat this accent, but that's quite difficult. I was like, no, this would be a problem. It would
Go
sound
for like
natural.
especially a Welsh one. It's hard to find resources, I guess.
So obviously you're probably able to look at that and make your own judgment about his English abilities, but we did have people that obviously wrote up comments on English, so I'm just going to read a couple of them right now. Review 3 from a native American English speaker. I had to update my review after listening to his Evil Deer interview. I'm not sure what happened with his previous 3-month interview, but he's a lot better here. I definitely believe him that he's been able to pass the C2 English exam. In my opinion, he's definitely the real deal. I am very impressed by Patrick, and I definitely think teaching English is respectable for him. I personally been in classrooms with non-native English speakers teaching English, and he's no worse than any of them. In fact, he's probably a lot better. Now, this person also wrote a disagreement section. They said, I generally disagree with anyone who doesn't give him an advanced score on this interview. It was conducted by us on our turf with one of our own people. At this point, saying he only talked about learning languages or he only used the same vocab is shifting the goalposts. We literally set him this task, and when he's cordial, open, and transparent, it's unfair in my humble opinion to say he can't be a C2 level speaker from just one interview. So reviewer 4, this is an update following the new interview. I'm grateful to Ben arranging this interview, but the audio did drop a few times, so I'm not going to be too harsh on pronunciation and intonation. Patrick does use English fillers. He seems to be able to discuss advanced topics and use a range of sentence structures. Sometimes he makes strange word choices, but they are still grammatically correct, so it's not necessarily an indication of a lower level. I would say he has definitely worked his way up to C1, but C2 is still up for debate. This person originally wrote one review based on previous videos, then we did our interview with him, and he's written an update. Updating my review after listening to the interview with Ben, I still don't think Patrick is a C2 in English, or at least there doesn't seem to be evidence for that in these interviews, but I'm willing to grant that he could be a C1 speaker. Patrick uses a lot of filler words and still seems to sort of talk around a couple of Ben's questions. I'm thinking particularly about Ben's question about whether Patrick read books in English, and Patrick went off in a different direction in his response. But I think he could be a low C1. I do think Patrick would benefit a lot from reading books in English. Now, this person placed him at a B2, but I'm not sure if this placement was based on the previous content or whether he actually did like a re-review of his interview that he performed with us. This part I edited after listening to the interview. His English level seems to be a bit better in the interview than in the other videos. I've noticed some small mistakes, but nothing too crazy. Conversation, however, was still focused mostly on language learning. And to be honest, since this is a topic he covers a lot, I would expect more advanced vocab. I appreciate having more information regarding his pronunciation course. He stated it was generally geared towards problems that Brazilian English learners encounter. I'm still not inclined to give him a C2. I'd say a B2 for sure, maybe a C1, if he can discuss the topics other than language learning. After reviewing the new resources of his English, I'd say he would still be in the same level as I ranked earlier. He is really good at the language with a few pronunciation mistakes and also a few grammatical mistakes, which I think is enough to impact his, which isn't enough to impact his teaching. I would still give him a solid C1 to C2. Now, there's a lot of reviews there, so I'm just going to summarize it for you. Okay, so based on this, I've kind of pushed his English a little bit down to somewhere between a C1 and a C2 territory, but he may actually be a C2. It's just we didn't put him up to, and this is probably our own fault here, we didn't actually test him in such a way as to test his ability to, you know, actually do a speech basically on a social issue that we pick in the moment, but he could definitely be a C2. Next up, Spanish. Now, unfortunately, I don't have subtitles for the Spanish here, so you're just gonna have to listen and hope you understand.
Creo que podemos pasar quizá al español ahora.
Nada, vale, sin problemas.
Ya hemos contado un poco cuándo empezaste con el español. Dijiste a los 7 años, ¿no? Pero
Yo tenía los 7 años, más o menos por ahí.
¿cómo se diferencia tu aprendizaje del español a tu aprendizaje del inglés?
Pues creo que la cosa más interesante es que el aprendizaje de español me acuerdo un poco más, ¿sabes? Y después también tuve experiencias en la universidad con español, entonces español es un poco diferente. Porque sí, me acuerdo más. En inglés me suena algo tan natural que si me preguntas demasiado del principio, como, ay, ¿cómo, por qué empezó y todo? No sé, no me acuerdo. Pero español sí que me acuerdo más o menos del principio. Am, y también, pues, la verdad es una lengua que me encanta muchísimo porque es no sé, es la lengua que más me gusta a mi mujer y así hablamos demasiado y intentamos introducir el español en la rutina con los niños. Incluso hay hay una charla en Polyglot Gathering de este año, no me acuerdo, que es como el arte de crear niños multilingües, donde yo hablo al lado de mi mujer acerca de eso en español.
Okay, so they say the new interview clearly shows a C1 level interview. He does, however, use a couple of grammatically Portuguese constructions, and they give an example of these constructions here. Reviewer 2 also wrote an update afterwards. These are my thoughts after watching Patrick's most recent available content, the interview. First of all, I'm very happy that Patrick accepted taking part in the interviews to confirm his language abilities. Regardless of the results of our investigation, this proves that he's an honest individual. Now, let's get to the review. Does he make mistakes? Of course, even natives make mistakes. However, he didn't make any blatant errors like the ones we had done before in older videos. And literally nothing that prevented me from understanding him. His main mistakes are related to borrowing constructions from Portuguese, and some pronunciation mistakes that actually could perfectly be explained by specific accent quirks of his, which isn't taken into account when accessing someone on the Common European Framework of Reference. My verdict is that there is absolutely no way Patrick is below a C1. He expresses himself fluently, is able to converse about a decent variety of subjects, and has appropriate and accurate usage of vocabulary. However, I'm still unable to place him at a C2 simply because although good and insightful, the questions asked unfortunately weren't advanced enough to guarantee us that he's a C2 level. Okay, and we'll have a look at one more reviewer. Before I start my review, I want to say this guy at the very least has knowledge of the Spanish language, not like the other frauds that we've dealt with. Now, the review. Based on my most recent interview organised, I would promote him from B2 to a C1, but not C2 because of the type of mistakes he had. And like I said pre-interview, his cadence, pauses, and rhythm of the Spanish language is good. However, he's still making the same mistakes of using Portuguese expressions or conjunctions from time to time. Less mistakes than before, but still there. Now, reviewer 5. This person's actually certified as C2, and they say, I was the interviewer for Patrick here. His expression in the interview was much better than that seen in previous videos. There is no possible way to justify giving below a C1 level. This is further reinforced by the fact that he helped several learners prepare and pass the C1 level exam. I also believe it's possible he could pass the C2 himself, given a bit of preparation time. We should give him the benefit of the doubt and take him at his word. So based on that, I pushed his Spanish slightly down, somewhere between the C1 and the C2, but again, he might already be at a C2 level. He just hasn't done the test, and unfortunately our interviewer didn't give enough questions to really dive into this and make a proper determination. But if you want to be generous, you can give him a C2. If you want to be really harsh on this, you're giving him somewhere like C1 plus type of thing. In any case, very good. Next up, French.
Toi, tu trouves que maintenant, c'est plus difficile qu'avant, ou c'est plus un problème qu'avant de la désinformation des gens, ou tu l'as pas remarqué?
Je crois que c'est plus difficile maintenant. C'est plus difficile parce qu'il y a vécu des informations, mais c'est positif cette chose qu'il y a beaucoup de gens, de beaucoup d'informations, par exemple les réseaux sociaux, mais aussi il y a beaucoup de fake news. Donc, par exemple, les stéréotypes aussi, c'est plus difficile de comprendre vraiment qu'est-ce que c'est vrai ou qu'est-ce que c'est faux. Donc, maintenant, c'est plus difficile. Mais, je ne sais pas, c'est normal, je crois. C'est l'actualité.
He's definitely fluent in French, but makes some mistakes, and they list out the mistakes here. He also admitted in one of his interviews that he sometimes uses Portuguese words in French. I would say he is a range from B1 to B2, even though he uses a lot of breaks mid-sentences and makes some basic grammar and pronunciation mistakes. Edit, I just watched about 10 minutes of the interview, and my opinion still is B1, B2. Reviewer 3. As someone who is still actively learning the language, he wasn't very hard to understand, but it seems as if he struggled to speak the language. I would not say he's fluent to the degree he claims. Overall, yes, he does speak French, but definitely not to the level he claims to have. Now, this person here is doing a review and they are a B1+. Now, some people say I shouldn't have learners doing reviews of other people because, well, if that person's above them, then how can they give a proper review? This is actually a really good way of getting good reviews because if you are a B1 yourself, you could recognize another B1 or below. That's basically because you know what you're testing towards. You know what's required at that level. So it's good to have both native speakers and then also learners do reviews. Now, reviewer 6, native. Personally, I find him very hard to understand because his speech is extremely slurred and he uses Portuguese words and sounds in French. I don't know any Portuguese, and I think the reason why he's well understood by his interlocutors is because they also know the language, so they can fill in the gaps. C1 is crazy to me because of the massive contrast between his French and Andrina's. She clearly expresses herself really clearly and close to a native French speaker, so he's talking about another interview that I haven't shown right here. I would give him a B1 because of all of these things adding up. I was the interviewer for Patrick here. My assessment would be a B2 level, generally agreeing with the other reviewers. He clearly has a lot of experience with the language because he doesn't hesitate too much, though he doesn't express himself in an advanced enough way to quite reach the C levels. So based on this, the French is going to be pushed down to a B2 level. Now, it's hard to say if it should be lower or if it should be maybe even a little bit higher, but B2 I think is a safe estimate. Next up, German.
Ah, ja, genau. Und woher kommst du?
Slowakei.
Ah, sehr cool. Und ja, also auf Deutsch, kein Problem. Vielleicht mein Deutsch ist ein bisschen verrostet und vielleicht nicht wahr. Meine Meinung, ich habe kein C1-Niveau jetzt vielleicht, weil, ich weiß nicht, ich habe einen kleinen Vokabeln und ich habe Vokabeln beherrschen. Aber auf Deutsch ist egal, es ist sehr Spaß. Ich liebe die Sprache und meine Geschichte mit der deutschen Sprache, das war fantastisch für mich. Und vielleicht ich habe kein Deutsch in meinem Kopf, aber ich habe Deutsch in meinem Herz. Ja.
He's capable of having basic conversations in German. He's understandable, but it's not great. His grammar is that of a beginner, and he takes frequent pauses to think of what to say next, sometimes using English words when he can't think of the German equivalent. He couldn't even say his own job title in German. I would place him at A2, B1, even if he's rusty, as he claims in his interviews. I doubt he's ever been above a B1. The Evil Deer interview just strengthens my opinion. After watching the review conducted by a member of the community, I believe he's a B1 level. He makes mistakes when he talks, but considering how the German sentence structure is very different from English, it is expected. He sounds a lot like people I know who have been certified A2, B1, and I'm going for the upper limit. He does mumble slur quite a bit, and he could benefit from learning to really emphasize his consonants. His vocab doesn't really have the freedom and breadth seen in a speaker with a C1 level. This person says, I would strongly disagree with anyone rating him as an A2. He's clearly able to express opinions and communicate ideas about topics he knows, and he can follow the main points of a C1 level input. That's certainly above an A2. He mentioned feeling a bit rusty in German, and it's possible he was once at a low B2 level. As of now, though, I would categorize him as a B1 functionally independent in familiar context, but limited when it comes to range and complexity. And this person says, his usage of words like this one here does indicate to me that he can get authentic German input, but it isn't enough to escape the low rating from me personally, and this might be a bit generous. I'd place him around a B1 plus, maybe lower. Okay, so the German has been pushed down quite considerably, and I would say this is probably the first big drop, because prior to this, all of these were maybe just overestimates of one's ability, but here, this is clearly a very big drop. Next up, Russian.
Хорошо, давай на «ты» тогда. Ты помнишь время, когда ты не знал иностранные языки и говорил только на португальском?
Нет, только на португальском не знаю, потому что первый раз, который я изучал иностранный язык, это был английский, и было что... было очень давно, Я был маленький, поэтому, не знаю. Без английского не помню. Без испанского может быть, конечно. После этого я изучал французский язык. И что еще? Не знаю. Думаю, что... не знаю. Русский? Русский нет. Немецкий первый, после этого русский, потому что я думал... я помню, когда я не говорю на русском, на иностранный язык нет. На русском я помню, потому что
Да, понятно.
был мой первый опыт славянский язык. И для меня, Саша, я очень люблю славянский язык. И это семья польский, русский, украинский и так далее, и так далее. Но русский был мой первый раз.
Okay, post-interview thoughts. After having watched the interview conducted with Patrick, I've changed my opinion overall from a B1 plus to a B2 to a B1. Patrick struggles a lot during the interview and he has trouble formulating longer utterances. He often misunderstands Igor's questions or doesn't give appropriate and straightforward answers. He forgets some basic words. And they give a breakdown here as well, and more of the grammar, and then finally the vocabulary and conclusion. I believe that his conversational and his speaking skills are currently at a low B1 level. He is able to have a conversation about basic topics such as his work and his language learning journey and routine, but with a patient speaking partner. I cannot give him a B2 because he hasn't really demonstrated a wide range of vocabulary necessary for this level. Okay, so another one for the post-interview. My overall verdict stays. I'd have to say that he may even be an A2 to a B1 in the active vocab aspect of things, with his overall speaking skill being a low B1. Given the interview, he's mostly talking about language learning, so the same topic he's been talked about in his previous videos. Now, by the way, our reviewers tried to go into more advanced topics at times, but when they found that it was too difficult, they would pull back to more familiar topics, and that's kind of to be expected. There is no way that he is anywhere near a C1. This person here also says, overall he's great and I love having real unscripted content, but he's not great enough for me to give him even a solid B2, let alone a C1, although his receptive skills are most probably at a higher level than his speaking, which is a B1+. And as you can see, this just goes on and on and on, where people basically break down everything from grammar, words, pronunciation, pretty much the whole works. And based on that, the Russian's also going to drop. It's going to drop somewhere between... Now, some people said, he's an A2 plus to a B1, and some said maybe a B2. I'm going to be generous here and give him like a B1 plus heading towards a B2. Again, this is another fairly big drop, and I think this is less of an overestimate of one's abilities and more so overselling one's abilities. Okay, next up, Polish. Now, we didn't have too much content to work with for Polish, and we didn't organize an interview with it because he already done a bunch of interviews for his other main languages. So as of now, we're mainly working off of content that he has provided online.
Cześć wszystkim. Nazywam się Grzegorz Księżyszkiewicz. Mieszkam w Superszczecinie. No, fajne. Żartuję, ale nazywam się Patryk. I dzisiaj chcę mówić tylko po polsku. To jest bardzo interesujące dla mnie, dlatego to jest mój ulubiony język. Ale pamiętam, moje pierwsze doświadczenie polskiego to była piosenka. I pamiętam piosenka, to była Kiedy przyjdziesz do mnie, Agnieszka Chylińska. Ale wiem, że polska wymowa dla mnie to będzie tylko po prostu fascynujące.
Okay, reviewer 1. Patrick's B2 claim is believable to me. I hear fluent use of adjective, graduation, conditional tenses, and long coherent speech. I attribute these skills, well practiced, used with relative ease, to a B2 level. But man, he really needs a new microphone, or he needs to step up his phonetics game. Even though he produces long, complex sentences, I sometimes have to pay close attention to understand some of the words he's saying. That said, this only happens occasionally, and there wasn't anything I couldn't grasp once I heard the full sentence. Based on the evidence provided, high B1 for sure, B2 small leap of faith. This person agrees with the first reviewer. His grammar is actually good, no huge errors, and from someone who's below B1 level, I'd expect a lot of those. Edit. After hearing his conversation with Sandra, where he finally speaks more, I lean more towards an A2 B1. There's a lot of potential though. I don't think he's intentionally misleading about his level, just misguided, just misjudging his skills because he knows other Slavic languages. This one says a lot of the other reviewers are very much overestimating his abilities. He didn't even know the word for two in Polish. As reviewer 6 pointed out, he also didn't know how to say no, which is one of the most basic words. His pronunciation is honestly pretty bad and he's constantly mixing in Slavic words. As has already been mentioned before, his pronunciation is not that great. He tends to put stress in the wrong place and I can hear the Russian influence in the way he speaks. I initially gave him a B1, but after reviewing the available material again, I'm inclined to say an A2. Now, this person actually translates what he says in this particular video, and they said, unfortunately, I don't think Patrick is on the B1 level, though some of the other reviewers award him. Patrick relies on his interlocutors for help. They seem to keep guessing what he means instead of actually understanding him. Now, I didn't show you that particular interview because the audio is just really, really bad, and I just don't want to ruin your ears. I want to point out to other reviewers and possible future commenters, kindness and criticism don't have to be mutually exclusive. The only part of my first review I'm leaving in, so the references for the others are clear, is how Patrick isn't able to say C2 in Polish in this video. He says 2 in German. I hope this is further proves that he just isn't ready for a B1. Okay, so the Polish drops from a B2 territory to, now, this could be an A2 plus to a low B1. If you're being super generous, maybe a little bit higher, as some of the reviewers have stated here. Oops, sorry, just kicked my mic. but it is a bit of a considerable drop. Next up, Ukrainian.
Привіт усім. Сьогодні хочу трішки розмовляти про українську та свій прогрес. І що ще? Вивчаю українську, тому що 2 роки, можливо, так, не знаю. Але, правда, я не вирішив вивчати українською через війну. Ні. Для мене українська мова – це дуже-дуже гарна і теж мелодійна і що ще. Так, українська культура для мене теж дуже цікава. Наприклад, люблю читати Василь Симоненко. Ясно, не можу розуміти без проблем, тому що є багато слів, яких я не знаю. Але так, це не проблема, тому що це природа.
Okay, now there was a few other videos where he actually takes part in interviews, but he is the interviewer, and he only really says like one sentence, like literally asks a question and lets the other person talk the whole time. But also the audio quality in those ones isn't great. This is the one with the best audio quality. Reviewer 1, my impression is that he's generally able to have a conversation in Ukrainian. His speech is quite slow, as if he needs to think about what he is saying, and he makes plenty of mistakes, but it is easy to understand. He is the host of the interview, which was the one I was talking about, so he does not speak that much and is able to control the conversation, so the error bars on trying to judge his skills are quite large. I'd say he's in the low B range. Now, this person actually broke it down. Receptive skills, not exactly clear, could easily be a B2 or higher for that matter, but there's no good way to prove that. Production skills, in the interview, A2, mostly correct language, but lack of confidence and many long pauses. Monologue, B1, same quality as the interviews, but less words forgotten and more natural pauses. I would give him an A2 to B1. He's definitely got potential, and I'm sure he invested the time into Ukrainian. The way he speaks is somewhat similar to what I am in French right now. Okay, Ukrainian native, to put it brief, he is overall not bad, however not quite a B2 level. He seems to be speaking pretty confidently, although sometimes he lost with his wording pronunciation, which is evidence according to him confusing words from Russian. I would say a low solid B1. Okay, so the Ukrainian has been pushed up to kind of a B1 level, which means it's not too far actually behind his Russian abilities, but this is also, we didn't have an interview with him, so it could potentially be a little bit lower if we actually delved into it with an interview. Next up, Belarusian.
Але це вельми цікаво, тому що я пам'ятаю,
Так.
коли я почав вивчати білоруську мову, це вельми популярне і зазвичай чому хочеш вивчати білоруською мовою? Ні, і людей розмовляють так само. Я можу розуміти, але не можу розмовляти, чому, не треба. І думаю, що не знаю, як, якщо треба, ні, але я хочу. І зараз, коли видиш, що ти розмовляєш тільки по-білоруську кожен день, це вельми цікаво для мене.
Okay, so as you can see, there's 2 Instagram reels here, and then we had this video come in, but this video came in much later on. So these 2 look like they are based only on the Instagram segments, not on the video that we just watched together. But they were saying for those Instagram videos that he could be around the B range, basically. Next up, Hebrew.
עכשיו בעברית זה קצת קשה. אליזה, ברוך הבא, הכל בסדר?
אצלי הכל בסדר, איך אתה?
בסדר, אבל עכשיו זה לא הכל בסדר, בגלל אני צריך לדבר בעברית, וזה קשה. זה לא קצת קשה, זה קשה מאוד.
זה קשה מאוד, אבל אתה יודע טוב.
טוב, לא, אני חושב שלא, טוב, לא כל כך טוב.
He's not a B1. I would say he's an A1 to A2. He himself says it's hard for him to speak the language. He doesn't know the words for song, there, was, east, life, and struggles with the language. Verdict, high A1, low A2. A1, learned a few words but messes up everything, repeating the fact he can't speak to the woman. He talks to her and asks her some really basic words he doesn't know, like song. Same few words and basically not yet at the speaking phase. Not terrible, high A1, mid A2. Okay, so Hebrew gets pushed down from the B range to like a high A1, and to me this is actually a pretty considerable drop. This is, again, it's not like a overestimate of one's abilities. This is, you would know you're not a B1 if you don't know the words like song and stuff like that. Next up, Czech.
Ahoj všichni, to jsem já, Patrik. Teraz musím mluvit česky. Musím říct, že to není tak snadné, protože mluvím česky, jako mluvím italsky. Ano. Například rozumím všemu v italštině a hodně čtu, ale když mám mluvit, používám hodně španělštiny, protože v něm mám vysokou úroveň.
He says that he understands Czech well, but it's very hard for him to speak, so he relies on Polish and other Slavic languages. I think this statement is true. I think his reading and listening skills might be stronger thanks to Polish, possibly above an A2, since he claimed to have read a Czech book and he understands the interviewer. So they're talking about another video here that I'm not showing. His grammar and pronunciation appear to be weak for an A2. His claim to A2 is spot on. His weakest point is pronunciation. That is bad even for an A2, but I still understood almost everything other than that he expresses himself in the long unscripted dialogue. I'd say that his level is around a low A2 apart from the pronunciation, which leaves a lot to be desired, to say around an A1. Okay, so his Czech is being pushed towards the left. It's like an upper A1 touching on an A2. Next up, Macedonian.
Сигурно. Ако зборувам, сакам да зборувам руски, македонски.
А турски не зборуваш, така што не можеш да го мешаш. Супер,
Не
супер.
зборувам турски.
Да, супер техника. Инаку ние учествувавме на Полиглот конференцијата, така, оваа година. Учествувавме на Полиглот конференцијата на тема македонски јазик, како ти учиш македонски јазик. И мислам дека наскоро ќе биде достапно на YouTube, така? Ќе биде достапно на YouTube
Да.
конференцијата, така што на Polyglot Conference зборувавме за техниките што ги користи Патрик за да учи јазици и конкретно македонски јазик. Супер! Имаш нешто да додадеш, сакаш нешто да кажеш, Патрик?
Не знам.
Тоа е се.
Starting with the positive, the two videos that I have him talking to someone else show that he is at least capable of understanding basic questions and he is capable of mustering up a response. Between the older videos and the new ones, there's definitely improvement, but not much. However, his own capabilities seem to be talking about language, talking about learning Macedonian, and his Macedonian vocabulary dances around the topic alone. His overall vocabulary lacks basic words. A very generous A1, nowhere near an A2, and certainly not professionally proficient. This person here has broken down basically his entire speech and covered off everything that was mentioned there. I agree with everything Reviewer 1 pointed out, mostly with the fact that this is far from an A2, let alone professional proficiency. He repeats words and sentences multiple times so he can recall what should come next. His vocabulary is only based on the topic of learning the language. So his Macedonian is now dropped from an A2 down to an A1 level. Next up, Italian.
Ciao ragazzi, ciao a tutti, io sono Patrick. Io ho bisogno di parlare in italiano. E certo, ho bisogno di parlare perché secondo me non posso parlare molto bene. Mi piace leggere in italiano perché in italiano posso leggere per esempio Dante Alighieri. No Dante Alighieri, ma qualcuno che parla di Dante Alighieri. Per esempio Corso. Perché traduzione, per esempio, non credo che sia. Non credo che è la stessa cosa. E mi piace tantissimo il libro di Dante Alighieri come La vita nuova.
Okay, Reviewer 1. He says that he can't speak Italian that well. He proceeds to mispronounce this word right here in two different videos. He also mispronounces this word, so I think he didn't really study the alphabetical basic pronunciation. Not sure if this is B1 at all, maybe an A2, but he should work on his pronunciation and learning actual Italian words and not using Spanish instead. He's definitely right that his Italian is contaminated by Spanish in his accent and he pronounces some words like T sound like te. He might be getting confused with Spanish or simply getting the sound wrong. By the way, I may have just pronounced that wrong. I think he's an A2, but a very low A2. He doesn't have a grasp of the sound of Italian at all. I think the two above reviewers were a bit too harsh in the evaluation. He does have Portuguese accent, but that doesn't make it particularly hard to understand. In the interviews, which I didn't show here, he doesn't appear to struggle much, which clearly depends on prepared topics, but it can also indicate that he does have indeed a B1 level. I would place him at a low B1, keep it a mid B1 is conversational but not fluent. I think he's about an A2 B1 level, like me, but I think maybe a lower B1. Okay, so his Italian drops from a B1 down to like a high A2, maybe a B1, but it's only a small change. Next up, Catalan.
Però això és un poc complicat, un poc entendre molt més del que parlo. Però després conèixer-te, vaig pensar que seria molt important aprendre la teua llengua materna. Aleshores, si us moltes de paraules en castellà, perdona, me pots corregir.
Tranquil, és normal perquè quan comença sempre pues, comença errant, però després pues, evidentment se millora i no passa res, és normal. O sigui que, genial, intentar-no.
No passa res? O sigui...
Okay, his Catalan is quite on point. He still uses a lot of Spanish words, but it's definitely an A2. At times, it could sound like a low B1, but sometimes I wonder if he has a strong accent or doesn't know the right stress in some words. I wouldn't be sure to call that professional working proficiency, though. Okay, so his Catalan could possibly be a little bit higher than it is at the moment, but we don't have enough content, and we didn't organize interviews for it because it was not like one of his main languages. Now, finally, Chinese. This is one I'm excited for.
But so, yeah, we need to switch into Chinese. Jesus Christ. Right. But I guess that's easier for you. So I'm just make questions. I guess I hope you can understand me. 我现在会说一点普通话。你为什么喜欢学习普通话?
Okay, so as you can see, we got barely anything out of him there. So pretty much, yeah, he's like a HSK1. So what we're going to do now is clean up this board to actually see where his languages lands. So you can see here, Portuguese obviously doesn't move, but English, Spanish, French, and Russian, that's 4 languages that he's gone out of his way to learn that are within the fluent range. That is an impressive achievement. Additionally, he's got a ton of languages within the lower intermediate range, the B1 range, which also makes him a highly capable polyglot, speaking so many languages. Now, I know there's going to be some critiques because, hell, I've got the same critiques. This does not match with his claimed abilities. So what are my thoughts on this matter? Normally, I don't like it when someone overestimates their abilities, but I can't be too harsh on it because nearly every goddamn polyglot out there does it. They overestimate their abilities, all bar one. And you know the person I'm speaking about who actually got upgraded in a bunch of languages. But in this case, he's overestimated a bunch of languages. There are some languages, usually, well, not usually, the ones that are in his higher range, which have been downgraded, but are possibly actually at the level that he claimed, but we just can't prove it because, well, it's really hard to prove a C2 in a bunch of languages without a certificate, realistically, or making him do a lecture. And finally, there are a couple of languages where he didn't just overestimate his abilities, he oversold his abilities because, like, they dropped down 2 levels. And I'm pretty sure he would be well aware that he overestimated his abilities in those languages. So there is a little bit of some shady stuff going on here. And normally I wouldn't be too happy about that. However, he was more than open to having interviews with us. And I think he took part in like 5 interviews. He actively took part in our community, answered all the questions when we asked him. Didn't matter when I pinged him, he would get back to me quite quickly with whatever answer I was looking for. And I feel like that deserves a lot of respect in itself because imagine you're being investigated and now you're taking part in your own investigation and this could never be a comfortable thing. And you can see that in the investigation videos where he's being interviewed. He doesn't always feel comfortable. So I understand that. And that could obviously, play a little bit against him. But definitely his abilities were overstated and overclaimed in several instances. However, he is an honest guy. He did take part in the interviews, and in several cases, he even mentioned that he feels like he's not what he claimed to be because, well, he took part in the interviews and he realized himself. So I'm not going to hold that really against him. Now, there is one final thing that I know some people are going to jump on, and it's something I usually jump on, and it's the fact that he's selling courses. So my thinking around courses is, I have no problem with people selling courses as long as they have the experience and expertise to back up them selling those courses. So if you're saying, I'm going to teach you Spanish, but you don't speak Spanish, well, then I'm going to, slap you across the head because that's just stupid. However, in this case, all the courses he's selling are for Spanish and English, and they're catered towards Portuguese speakers, which obviously he is a native of. And in this case, I think he has the right to sell those courses. It doesn't matter the price. Prices don't bother me. He has the right to sell courses, so I'm not going to hold that against him. But there is that one course where he claims you can get from 0 to B2 in 4 months. Now, I know he's presented me with some edge cases, and he has certificates to prove that some people have actually done that, but those are edge cases, and his sales team needs to be more upfront about that. They need to say, well, this is like in the ideal case. Now, you're probably not going to be the ideal case, but maybe you are if you come into this, with all the perfect conditions in place. It is a problem with marketing overall that people always pick, the best of the best and present that as the average. When realistically, most people, 99% of people, are not going to go from 0 to B2 in 4 months. Let's just be honest here. Let's not be silly about this. So overall, I really like the guy. And I hope he continues to be highly successful, and I hope he continues learning his languages. And I look forward to seeing his Chinese progress over time, because obviously that's the language that I'm learning. And I have no hate or animosity towards the guy. I reckon he's a highly capable polyglot, and he deserves respect, although he just needs to correct some of his public statements about his abilities and talk to his sales team. That's pretty much all I've got to say on the matter. So if you've enjoyed this video, please let me know in the comments below. If there's anyone you want me to investigate, drop their name below. Even if you've dropped their name in every single video since, sometimes we just got to be prodded enough for that person's name to pop to the top of the list. That's pretty much how it works. And I'll see you all in the next video. And if you're not there, well, then that means you have been investigated and found wanting, and your body never found.